Here we go. Councillor Bartley, are you there? Hold on. She will be shortly. Do we need to wait? No. All right, item 8, asset recycling. Unlike our savings targets, we're not over halfway yet, but we have made a start. And so I'll hand over to Mr. Churnside and our friends from Auckland Transport to talk about the properties, and note, Ross, that Sharon's question at the end of this sort of bit on Whangaproa, could you address that for her, please? Thank you. Over to you.
This morning I'm joined by Jane Small, who's Group Manager Property and Planning, and Rantir Karma, who's Group Manager Integrated Networks for Auckland Transport, just to help the committee with this paper today. I largely covered the update that I was going to give in general in response to Member Blair's question earlier. But coming in November, we'll have a more fuller update report to the committee. So today, the focus is on this property opportunity, and there's another item in confidential, which I'll come back to talk to you about. We're starting to pivot a little bit in the asset recycling as well. We talked about having two focus areas. We've got properties and alternative commercial arrangements, starting to look more into that alternative commercial arrangement space. The largest opportunity was car parks that we signalled as part of the emergency budget. But over the next couple of months, we'll come to a couple of workshops just to discuss with you some other opportunities that you may wish to consider. So just to the report that's on your agenda today. This is asking to approval to dispose of a group of properties located on the Whangaproa Peninsula. They're a mixture of houses and bare land, and they were acquired by the former Rodney District Council for roading purposes. Now, NZTA have taken over the Penlink project, and these properties sit outside the designation of where the Penlink route is going to be, and they're no longer required for transport purposes. I'm just going to put up a couple of slides to show you some location slides. So this one, you've just got two properties just shown in red. I'm going to just quickly pass over that. I'm going to go to the second slide. Sorry, the third slide, I beg your pardon. The third slide, where you've got a large group of properties all across, all joined up. But I say the Penlink designation is outside of where these. So, brief history. So the rationalisation process was commenced in 2018. Engagement occurred with the ward councillors, local boards. Feedback was received. Actually, we believe that some of this land should be retained for future roading purposes. And based on that feedback, Auckland Transport have legalised a portion of that land, so that actually for future transport purposes, there is a portion of those properties have been retained. And that's shown by the red line on your slide. We included these properties in the emergency budget consultation document. During that process, Councillor Walker has raised some concerns, particularly about the intersection of Brightside Road and Whangaproa Road, and that's the box in blue up on the slide there. Councillor Walker had asked Auckland Transport to respond, and Auckland Transport did, but actually, there was more like richness, let's say, available to actually understand the situation here. So I actually, spoke to Shane Ellison and, involved the Auckland Transport team, two colleagues sitting beside me, to work through and make sure that Auckland Transport had checked everything off so that they were comfortable about the decision to dispose. Auckland Transport have assessed this intersection as a medium priority for road safety improvements, but due to funding and prioritisation, that's probably greater than 5 years away. Although they do think that actually, traffic signals will be part of the future design for that intersection. The local board have asked to be more fully briefed on these plans, and that's actually happening later today. It's really unfortunate timing, but actually time is not our friend in terms of the emergency budget. But the local board had a position where they opposed. They took on board what Auckland Transport have said, and now they just want to understand a bit more about that. So the Auckland Transport team are sort of split between here to the committee, and at the same time shortly for the local board workshop that's about to commence. But I say, there has been a lot of analysis done for this particular decision. We've continued to use our principles actually, as we work our way through this, so actually the alternative use principle very clearly, so actually just double and triple check that we do not require that land. We were scheduled to come, bring this decision to you in the September meeting, but we just gave ourselves some more time to make sure that actually the concerns raised had been addressed. And actually, as we work through, the future asset recycling, make sure the pipeline is big enough for us. So my role in asset recycling is to bring information to you as a committee. I'm supported by staff across the council group, because asset recycling is very much a group thing. Today, supported by Auckland Transport. Our professional advice is that these properties are not required for any future transport or other service use, and disposing of them would not impact on council's ability to deliver its services. Further disposal will actually, support and assist, our asset recycling target. The rating value of these properties is around $14 million. But obviously, happy to take any questions. Ciara.
Thank you for that. I'll put the recommendations on the table for discussion first. I'll move, Councillor Cooper will second. Questions for Auckland Transport or Ross? First question, I have Councillor Hills. Thank you.
Sorry, Madam Chair. I probably was a question for the last piece, but I thought it would be an overall question part in here. I guess my concern is, and it probably does relate to these properties, is what happens if we do not reach our target for sales? Does that automatically start a program for cuts across the business as a staff? Like what is, not only if the governors, we don't sell more properties, but if you can't sell them as a business. So, yeah.
Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Hills, through the chair. So yeah, we adopted an emergency budget. We looked at the various levers to be pulled. If one of those levers can no longer achieve the reduction of costs that we were looking for, we'd have to look at the others. So, as was mentioned in the last item, we are sort of giving ourselves till December to find out what those trends look like, the revenue trends, the sales trends, what the pipeline, the feasibility of the pipeline may look like, and Ross may want to elaborate on that. So come back after Christmas, we'll have a reassessment of whether we think the emergency budget is still achievable by pulling the levers to the degrees we thought it was. If any of those are at risk, to a great degree, we'll have to reassess what may be another way to resolve the issue. Normal years, you would just put any shortcoming in revenues or extra expenditure would just become a debt factor. As you know, debt's the one that's actually reached the limit now. So we'd have to look very, very seriously if we just want to let this fall onto the debt.
And with the sort of, I don't get a idea of a green light, orange light, red light. What you say it's 20, what has been sold, but what is sort of in the realm of, almost or on the way? Do we have an indication of kind of a ballpark of where we think what's in train?
Yeah. So through the chair. So we have a budget of 244 million. As we know, we've realised about 23 of that in the first 3 months of the financial year. We have properties approved by this committee being either at sale or being prepared for sale of just over $100 million in value. We believe we'll be able to realise that $100 million in value by 30th of June. We have some other properties, and Councillor, if I may just pick up Councillor Stewart's question, we have some other properties which actually we have a legal process to go through around reserve revocation. There's a very structured process that goes through. So actually, those properties are unlikely to be ready for sale or brought to market until next financial year. But again, as we're having a lot of workshops at the moment around long-term plan. We know that we're going to have some challenges. So actually, that's just setting us up for the future financial year. The big item that we identified in the emergency budget was the car park concession. We haven't put a value on that. It is progressing, but we're not ready to come and talk to the committee as yet. But again, I say in November, I would like to be able to in a position to give you a much fuller update, a much clearer forecast, and try and give you some comfort to your question, Councillor. because in response to Member Blair's question, the cycle time is really important, and different types of property are going to have different cycle times, and that's what we're just trying to get to grip with at the moment. All the properties that have improved to date, Panuku have developed go-to-market plan, for want of a better term. Actually, how do they take them and how do they realise that? That was discussed with Panuku's board yesterday, who have signed off that general approach. And again, I'll build that into the report to you in November.
Thank you. So just want to reiterate again. So if we don't get the target, does it automatically start becoming service cuts and staff cuts across the organisation, or does it come back to us to make those calls? Or we don't have an option?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Lots of moving parts here. So no, it won't automatically result in service reductions or staff reductions. What it will mean is we'll have to look at whether our revenue streams are as affected as much as we thought. The $450 million was the expected revenue drop. Is that going to eventuate? We'll have some more information when we get to that half-year result. We can reassess that, bearing in mind that revenue then gives more debt capacity. So yeah, no, we've got to look at all of the levers. How much is the expenditure? We've actually made some good savings cuts. Are we going to achieve the 120 million? Is it going to be more? You know, will that actually assist here? So no, we'll have to actually weigh all of the levers up and come back to you with a bit of a more complete picture.
Thank you.
So just to confirm, that's why we're having these monthly updates of the emergency budget, because it's not, you know, it's unknown for everybody. Yeah. Councillor Stewart, did you want to add something in while?
Yes, just on the selling of properties, we won't be selling them just for a song. Is that correct? Because I remember what happened with the CAB building across the way, and I just want to make sure that if we are going to be selling any of our buildings, they're not going to be for a song. And why I've had a few people that have contacted me about the old library and Howick, the Fenceville one, which has been an ongoing problem, not only for Auckland Council, but for Manukau Council. At one point it had been sold. Somebody, a private person, had purchased it for about $800,000 way back in 2004, and they were unable to actually do anything with it. So Manukau Council ended up having to buy it back. And the building has really sat almost empty since 1995. So it is a building that there are a few problems with a building like that. And I just wanting to make sure that if we are going to be selling, we need to make sure that whoever's going to be purchasing the buildings are paying, you know, the current market rate, but they are able to actually do something with the building and then not find that they've purchased it. And then we have all the parking issues, which have always been a problem for that particular site. And I think Auckland Transport's got something to do with some of the parking just outside of the library. So whatever development's going to happen there, I think we have to make sure that you know, because I've had people contact me and they're wondering whether they can buy it for a song, and I said, well, it's nothing to do with me what people are going to buy it for, but you know, then community people wanting to buy it again, and they have to realise that if anybody's going to buy it, there's going to have to be some money spent on it, or it'll have to be a rebuild. So we just want to make sure that we're not giving people false expectations, if you know what I mean, because it's been a problem since 1995. And I'm not saying, you know, I'm full selling it, but I'm just wanting to make sure we don't have a problem again.
Do you want to?
I'll pass comment if I can. I'm familiar with the property Councillor Stewart is talking about. I suppose the aspect I would like to pick up on two elements. One is some of our properties, you know, are not necessarily assets, they're actually liabilities, and the one you describe, I think, probably sits in the liability category, given the age and the deterioration that's occurred from a building not in use. But if we go back to when we passed the emergency budget, we adopted some principles, and one of them was to value for money. And we said some of the tests around value for money was actually, if we're going to run an open market contestable process, we'll have one valuation. If we're going to do a closed process, say to Kianga Ora or a housing trust or someone else, we'll get two valuations. And actually, over the portfolio, we need to make sure that we're actually no less than 90% of that valuation. you know, so we set those sort of hard parameters, and then that's where Panuku has picked up with, and I said they went to their board yesterday for each of the properties around actually what the best approach is to maximise the value from each of those properties.
Just further on that, because this particular building has been for a long time, you know, Manukau and Auckland Council. Oh, don't worry, that's all right, that's okay.
Thank you, Councillor. Look, this item is about the sale of property in Whangaparoa. If anybody's got a general asset recycling question, maybe answer it now, and then we'll get into what we're really supposed to be doing, which is the sale of property in Whangaparoa. No? Right, let's go into the sale of Whangaparoa. And I have Councillor Walker.
Sure. Through you, Madam Chair, is it possible to put up that plan that Ross showed that shows the red line with the property setback on the Whangaparoa Road properties? Okay. So if we can focus in on that blue elliptical there, the concern that I have raised, and this is fairly easy to understand, is if you look at all of those properties on Whangaparoa Road, and this is an incredibly busy road, there's an access way that serves some of those properties right now. In the past, a number of those properties accessed and egressed directly onto a very busy and very hazardous section of that road. It has 3 blind corners. Now, logically, what should happen is the access way in front of all of those properties along Whangaparoa Road, which now has provision by that red setback that Auckland Transport has agreed to, that setback should continue along to cover off those 2 properties on Brightside Road, so the access and egress point is away from what is a hazardous intersection on Brightside Road. It is hazardous. I am intimately familiar with this. I know that the local board shares this position. So all we have asked for is not to stop any sale. By all means, sell all of the properties. No problem. But just make sensible provision for an access way which not only serves the properties, and those properties will probably be intensively developed, but will also allow for walking and cycling off what is a very hazardous section of that road. You would not want to cycle there. You'd be taking your life in your hands, and even walking along there is difficult. I have asked Auckland Transport to prepare a sketch plan to demonstrate this. A simple sketch plan, nothing that involves too much expense, but I haven't had that. And yes, they say that they don't think there are issues around the intersection, Brightside Road, but that's not the issue. The issue is around starting this access way down in Brightside Road as far away from the intersection as possible. The last thing you want is a busy access way right on the intersection where buses and so on turn. So the question that I've got to you, Ross, is there any problem just continuing that setback line around that corner to take in those 2 properties in 4 and 6 Brightside Road, along the same lines as the other properties that Auckland Transport has dealt with? Is there an issue with that?
I think Auckland Transport should answer that. Randy?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. Thank you, Councillor Walker. Look, we have had a look at that. I think just before I answer that question, I just want to clarify as well the intent for that red line that you see up there. We have gone through the processes that Ross just outlined in terms of the feedback that we got from both yourselves and the local board. We've had a look at that corridor, what the transport needs are strategically, operationally, and what maintenance requirements are needed for that corridor. We've also considered the effects of the future pen link as well. What that red line essentially identifies is the setback for transport needs into the future, not for access into those properties. What you see there, the existing access is, as you pointed out, Councillor, serves a few properties, not all. the intent is not to continue that access all the way along the red line up into the intersection. With Penlink coming on board and the modelling that was done by Auckland Transport's Forecasting Centre, but also Waka Kotahi, the modelling is suggesting that the traffic volume patterns will change in that part of the network with Penlink, and the expectation is that traffic volumes will drop along Whangapara Road as well. That will then, I guess, reduce the safety risk, which our teams have had a look at as well. And so accessing those properties off Whangapara Road becomes less of a concern. But I just want to clarify that the intent is not to continue the access all the way along towards the right of that picture up to the blue circle. And so we don't see that there is a need to continue the red line onto the two properties fronting onto Brightside Road. I mean, certainly if the desire is to do that, it could be accommodated through processes subsequent to this, but that reduces the amount of land that we can dispose of. But from a transport perspective, we don't see that there is a need for it based on what I've outlined.
Okay, Ken, a supplementary question. So in terms of the amount of land, what's the setback that you've already agreed to for Whangapara Road properties? I think it's 5 metres, isn't it? Is that going to be of any consequence to the sale, really? And the further question I've got is, have you even prepared a simple sketch plan, which is what I've been asking for, a simple plan to show the continuation of the access way? Do you have any plan?
No, Councillor, we don't. We've had that discussion prior as well. We haven't prepared one because for this level of assessment, there isn't a need for it. We've had a look at the corridor from a strategic perspective, but also what existing operational plans are in place for the particular corridor. So we haven't prepared it, and we don't intend to prepare one because it's not really required. I guess for me, and it's probably a question for the wider group, but an understanding also is that if we were to set back land, do we want to be setting back land within road reserve to provide for private access, which is what that short piece actually does. And in our view, it's not normal, not usual to set aside road space for private access. That is a bit of an anomaly. It's historical, but I'd venture to say that you setting aside road reserve, which could be used for future maintenance, road widening to link in with the the Penlink connection, that strip of land that's set aside, that's what the intent is for, not to provide private access way.
Through you, Madam Chair, but we're already providing space for the existing access way that is there, that is on an incredibly hazardous part of Whangapara Road, incredibly hazardous. In principle, if you can have all of those properties not accessing onto that busy road, but accessing off Brightside Road, surely that's desirable. And I mean, I'm not asking for something difficult here. It's incredibly sensible.
If I could just speak to that from a planning perspective, we would expect that anyone who purchases those properties would provide the access in a safe manner within their own land, not within the road reserve. So while we accept that there's a historical encroachment, if you like, of that private access way into the road corridor, and because of the levels, there is a need to perhaps retain in the future. That's why we've set back beyond that. But going forward, any development on those sites would have to go through the normal unitary plan process, and it would be assessed by Auckland Transport. And at that point, there may need to be an access way provided, but that would be within the private land of the developers, not within the road corridor. And as Randy has said, from an Auckland Transport perspective, that's a transportation perspective, we would not provide private access ways within the road corridor.
So that's the key point, isn't it? The difference between road corridor, I mean, we're looking at land. I mean, we're not the transport planners, you are, and I think you've actually simplified it for me now. That's the key point, the difference between the road corridor and the private land. I've got it now. Thank
Through you, Madam Chair.
Right.
I mean, the issue at stake here is this access way that we're talking about is not so much for the properties on 4 and 6. It's to access the multiple of properties along that corridor that could well have some intensive form of development, and not to enter into the situation that we were confronted with, I think it was yesterday, where you have these private access ways and the unitary plan is defunct around them. Okay? So here is me raising an issue against a background where these private access ways are hopeless, and we had that discussion the other day, and there's an opportunity to address it quite easily with probably no reduction in value. I don't understand why the objections are, and Auckland Transport haven't even prepared a simple sketch plan.
Do you want to say anything more, Randy?
Look, Madam Chair, thank you through you. And look, from my perspective in closing, perhaps, because we have had this conversation and we've raised these issues previously and had the conversation with yourself, Councillor, as well. Look, from our perspective, we have done the due diligence. We've had a look at what the needs are from a transport perspective. That red line, if you follow it to the left of the page, we've conservatively taken that all the way to the extreme left of the page from a road widening perspective to future-proof any connections we may need to provide for in terms of Penlink. Widening further the red line into the private properties we don't see a need for as I've outlined. That width provides us sufficient to provide for future widening to deal with any traffic or safety issues that may arise should they arise. But from our perspective and in our professional opinion, that's where we're at, and that is the extent to which we believe we need to provide for.
Thank you, Randy. Member Wilson.
Thank you. Rationalisation, hey, that's the way that we also would see that we can move forward. And in that vein, we'd like to see it, that it is robust, transparent to aid that process. I'm looking at the Maori impact statement to see how best that can aid the process. So I'm just making a couple of questions around the engagement part to ensure that there isn't anything that stops that or provides a timeline that can't be achieved. So I see there in para 36, there's the talk about relevant mana whenua. And then further down in para 37, it talks about all. In other Māori impact statements and is contained in other items here, there is a need to indicate who's relevant and who's not. I would suggest that that might have some effort put into that to ensure that because I see further down that it comments that no feedback was received and makes an assumption that there's no objection. So to aid that part of the kōrero around potential obstacles for Māori, I would suggest that that process needs to be sufficiently robust and transparent, and a fuller understanding of how Panuku runs that part of the process probably would aid as well. So it's not a criticism, it's a commentary, but just to indicate that that will add to this Māori impact statement to ensure that rationalisation is a key means to ensure this doesn't include miscommunication. I think Councillor Filipaina brought that up as well, that communication needs to be very, very good.
Yeah, through the chair, thank you. Thank you for that feedback. We'll take that on board for subsequent reports. The engagement with iwi is twofold. One is there any customary elements, and then the second bit is there any commercial interest, and certainly there's two different types of conversations. But yeah, certainly take on that feedback and thank you.
Kia ora, thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And I think my question has probably been answered, but it was going to be, what's changed from when Rodney purchased these properties till now? And the answer is that Penlink's actually a reality and traffic movements change. That's the correct answer? Yeah.
That's correct, Councillor.
Thank you.
Councillor Watson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So 23 properties here, a very generous offering to the Auckland Council asset sale program, I'd have to say. And as Councillor Walker said, that we have no objection to the sale of these properties, all of them. And the only matter of contention is these two particular properties here. Now, what's probably not sufficiently evident from this photograph is that during the 1950s, Whangaparao, of course, was a holiday area, and there's some pretty haphazard arrangements with the streets. So there's some really peculiar gradients and designs as it goes to intersections and the roads. In fact, they were flogging some of these sections off for £30 during the 1950s, which would have been quite a good investment in retrospect. But what's not sufficiently evident here is that at the very intersection here is that actually sticks out a lot. So you've got this really curious entry to this section where people swing out to get round the bit that sticks right out. So it's a dangerous spot for people walking. It's dangerous if you're coming up the other side because cars, generally go around at some speed. And now, under this proposal, we're conceivably going to have, quite a number of people stopping here and trying to turn in, particularly at peak times. So that hasn't been addressed. So yeah, great. The legalisation of the boundary up to that point is fine and is what is required. But curiously enough, at the very worst point, the very most vulnerable point, we've suddenly stopped. Now, someone mentioned the loss of price in the sections. Both these sections are 1,012 square metres, okay? So these are big sections. We're not going to lose any money on the sale price of the sections, losing 5 square metres at all. What we've been told here, and this is my question, we've been told that we should leave this to the consenting process, and AT will be able to have input through Auckland Council into conditions which will need to be fulfilled by the developer. So my question to you, Randir, is how did that assurance on relying to the consenting process work out just down the road in the next frame at the entry to the New World supermarket? How well did that assurance work out when we left it to the consenting process?
Thank you, Councillor. I'm not personally aware of the example you raised further down the road, but I do know where you're going with your question around, I guess, level of assurance through the consenting process. I can say to you that we work extremely closely with Council's regulatory and planning team in terms of resource consents. And once we know what the use for a particular land is, we have a much more credible argument, if you like, around what we need for that particular site and how it needs to be serviced from the road. And we have good conversations through the RMA process around what the access requirements are, and that's allowed for during the consenting process. We are one of the key CCOs inputters into the consenting process, and that's been set up through council as well. So we have many successful outcomes in terms of access requirements, transport requirements through development. One thing I will also point out is that intersection, the points you've raised, Councillor, about safety, I'd say that, look, they're valid, and I appreciate that both yourself and Councillor Walker know the intersection really well, live in the area, and so it's really good local feedback. That intersection is definitely on our radar for safety improvements, but obviously given the reduced funding that we have going forward, where that sits in our program has obviously been pushed further down the track. What we're intending to do is actually look at trying to get some safety and operational outcomes for that intersection through the pending conversations that we're having with Waka Kotahi. So that will be some pretty interesting negotiations, because we'll be asking for perhaps more than what can be provided out of that project, but I think there's an opportunity there for us to actually land that and reshape that intersection so that we don't have the risk that you raised, but also not moving the intersection closer towards the land that's required. So in fact, there may potentially be more land within the road reserve as well. But through that process, through the consenting processes, I am confident that we can achieve the outcomes. But more importantly, we've identified that those two properties, we don't need to actually identify further land to be kept aside for access ways.
Yeah, so thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm not trying to be awkward here, but it looks like I have to answer my own question. And part of the reason most of the reason that's driving my concern here is what did happen with the consenting process down the road. And it's a little disappointing that people in Auckland Transport don't appear to be aware of that. What did happen was that because of the design of the entrance to the New World, we now have, for the last 2 years, massive congestion that didn't exist before, because at that intersection, through the consenting process, we have a right-angled turn, which means all the traffic comes to a stop. All these roads at peak time, as the traffic's backed all the way to Vaipine Road, because of the way the consenting process handled that intersection with the New World. So that was bad enough. So that happened, and there's been accidents, and it's really dangerous. And at peak hour, rush hour, we've had this massive build-up of congestion. So that was bad enough. But when we complained and the community complained, Auckland Transport went back to try and ameliorate it, which instead of a 90-degree turn, we've got about a 87.5% degree turn, which has helped a minuscule bit. But the congestion that was created because of the way that consenting issue was heard still persists, and the whole traffic flow along the network suffers as a consequence. That's why I don't have confidence in the consenting process. Once bitten, twice shy.
I'm going to give a follow-up question to this, Randir, because I kind of know the area a bit myself. Am I correct in saying that you don't believe that we need to retain that section because I think everyone's going to try and get the same outcome here, if I'm not mistaken. I think you're saying we don't need it. You don't need to keep it. You can sell it. However, because Penlink will change the movement on the road, the congestion won't be so bad. Because you have the ability and you work fairly well with Waka Kotahi, NZTA, you'll have some discussions about improving it earlier than what you've planned to assist in the whole general upgrade of the congestion around in that area, that you'll probably achieve the outcome potentially that Councillor Walker and Watson are looking for, which is a safety improvement of that intersection, without having to keep that land, and do it that way, and then move it into the difference between the public and the private ownership that Jane talked about. You think you will be able to achieve, is this right, that you think you'll be able to actually achieve those outcomes, and therefore we don't need to keep that bit? Is that correct? I mean, it sounds a bit of a long way of getting around there, but I'm trying to helicopter over what everyone's thinking, and I actually know the intersection, and it's a bit of a nightmare. So I think potentially, are you saying we can actually achieve the outcome that these councillors are after in a slightly different way? Yes, consenting is one of them, but actually more importantly for me is the conversation or the deal breaker you have with Waka Kotahi. Would that be correct?
Yes, Madam Chair, mostly. I'd say the work that we're doing with Waka Kotahi is our current and most immediate opportunity to get the outcomes at that intersection. As I say, we are currently in negotiations with them, but that is absolutely the vehicle and the intent, is to try and get those outcomes through the work that we're doing with them. We don't have any of the assurances yet, but that is currently our immediate opportunity.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, you have a question.
Just a question, and it is around, because I'm not an engineer. The way I see it, so you've still got the ability, you've got that pointy bit of land on the right-hand side is council land, because I see the boundary of that property doesn't include as you come out the mouth of Brightside Road, in that blue circle. I can't point to it, but yeah, so you can take that out. You've got room to do, if you need to do things, even if it was a controlled lights, intersection, that would help, because you've got that bit, and there is another sliver on the other side.
Yeah, that's correct. If you're going to do any work, we'll basically move the road to the right of that page.
Yeah, okay. So you would have enough room, because it sounds like, maybe, but I know, because I've had the same experience with Hobsonville Road was massive. You couldn't turn right or hardly even left out of Luckens Road. As soon as we got State Highway 18, moved onto a motorway section, the traffic dropped from about 40,000 a day to about 8. Even though it's gone up, it's still, so I've seen that you can, once you get that motorway, pen link in line that can help with that. So yeah, I just wanted to be reassured that the piece of land that's still available there on the other side from the properties we're looking at disposing of is AT land.
Yes, that's correct. And that's where we want to do the widening anyway. We wouldn't push the intersection any further left of that circle.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Yeah. Right, comments then. Councillor Walker, you can lead off.
So I've put up an amendment by way of addition, Madam Chair, and I'd appreciate if that could appear on the screen. So what we've heard, Madam Chair, is a circumstance where Auckland Transport acknowledge a number of problems. But fundamentally, if you don't actually retain a little bit of land, once you've sold it, you can't actually resolve those problems later. And that's what this concern is about. All we're talking about is a setback of 5 metres that they have already done with all of the other properties. Both John and myself and many members of the community, including an engineer that I met on site, would agree that this is a very, very pragmatic solution. If Auckland Transport can't even prepare a simple sketch plan to indicate what I'm suggesting, that would show the access way, the retaining wall, the provision of walking and cycling, if they can't even do that, then how can they make this call? And without wanting to be too critical, we have a track record all around Auckland where Auckland Transport does not pick up these basic things early on, and then we end up with problems like we experience at New World, which is a serious problem as far as the local community is concerned, that goes directly to the sort of process that we're generating now. So that is a simple amendment by way of addition. All it says is request that the sale of the properties at 4 and 6 Brightside Road make provision for the access way to start at 6 Brightside Road. Now, if the space already allows that, then fine, you don't need to have the setback. But if Auckland Transport actually do their homework, and this will require them to do that, and they do need to make provision, then they'll have to make an adjustment. So this is a very open addition, and it covers both bases. And what could be wrong with that? If that amendment does not go through, I'm sure both myself and Councillor Watson will be voting against the sale of those properties. And this will attract huge concern on the part of a very large population that actively uses this road on an ongoing basis.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments on the amendment? Councillor Watson.
Okay, thank you. And I just, say at the outset, this is taking way longer than it should, this item. And it's not as if this has been sprung at the last minute. So we've been in attempted conversations and real conversations since early last year on this, as indeed have the local board. So that, this has been dragging on ad nauseum. Councillor Walker is right. We asked for a very simple sketch plan to just sort of show how this might work. And as he said, we're told that, there wasn't the resource in Auckland Transport to do that. I don't know about you, but every week, or it seems like every week, I have detailed plans coming across my inbox for judder bars and raised crossings and, a little yellow line here and a white line there, just on a regular basis. So at a crucial part of the Whangaproa Road network, which is acknowledged here, this is a crucial part of it, it does seem a little curious that the resource can't be found to do a quick sketch plan with respect of this property here. So in terms of the sale process goes, this has no impact on the sale of the properties or on the quantum that's up for sale. As I said, these two particular properties are both well over 1,000 square metres, and it's highly likely that this will be part of an integrated development anyway. So let's just put aside the loss to council in terms of revenue, because there is none. I come back, however, to my question. So, you know, we've been told that, you know, if ifs and ands made pots and pans, we'd be all better off being Tinker's type of approach to the future, that there's various things that have been talked about, but nothing in terms of any surety. All I can look at is a situation that exists just down the road, next door to this, which has been an unmitigated disaster. Right? It really has. And I don't like to use hyperbole, but it has been disastrous on the flow along Whangapara Road. It is dangerous, and it causes huge congestion in the PM peak, and it was totally unnecessary. And that situation we have to live with. We have to now live with ad nauseum. Now, as much as panelling will reduce the traffic in 5 years or 6 years' time, wherever it ends up getting fixed, that's not really the sole issue here. It's the configuration of this intersection at this point, where there's now going to be, you know, quite conceivably a huge increase in the number of residents going in, and nothing's been done to address that. So you know, we will have traffic going around that corner, stopping to, again, a pretty brutal stop to turn into access these properties. That's going to be dangerous, irrespective of whether in 5 or 6 years' time the flows from Penlink alleviate the peninsula as a whole. So it's a pretty reasonable and minor request, in which, you know, due recognition to Auckland Transport, they have addressed with the balance. But at the most crucial point in our view, as the local councillors and along with the local board, it hasn't been followed through with this really minor adjustment that alleviates all the concerns, allows the 23 properties to go like that, and addresses the concerns of the community. Because as much as we're in here repeating this to you, the local paper on a regular basis is full of stories detailing the problems in this stretch of road, primarily to do with this disaster at the New World entrance, which you know, on a nightly basis, there's misses and near misses that respond. So the consenting process hasn't fixed it up before. There is no guarantee that it'll address it again. So the simplest way is for this relatively minor adjustment that doesn't cost anything, doesn't reduce the sale, addresses the local concerns. Why wouldn't you do it?
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Con.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and kia ora koutou. Totally respect the ward councillors and your knowledge for this area, and it's good to hear your support for the sale in terms of a road widening project that's not going to happen. I guess many of us around this table consider ourselves to be bush engineers, and I put myself in that category as reindeer well knows. I like to think that I can get down in there in terms of designing roads, but none of us have those skills around the table. So what I really look for is what is the outcome that we're trying to achieve as governors. And so if this amendment was worded in terms of the outcome and ensure that there's a safe outcome, which is what I'm hearing that the ward councillors are looking for, rather than the actual solution, because I think it's the experts that need to tell us what the solution is and find a way forward. So I just wonder can this be framed in a way that's it's requesting or ensuring that when the sale goes ahead, that safe provision is made for access, or just in terms of what is the advice we can get from Auckland Transport that we should be looking for in terms of the sale, and make sure that that's acknowledged. And I just wonder if that might be a way forward, because does concern me in any transport project that we are trying to dictate the solution rather than the outcome. The design solution, I should say.
Might the mover of the amendment respond, Madam Chair?
Yes, you may.
I'm sure the mover and the seconder of the amendment are quite happy to have a modification that could add the words safe provision for the access way and intersection improvements if necessary.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I guess I was looking for that. My comment was kind of also looking for a response from, if it's possible, from Auckland Transport about how we could word this in a way that makes it really clear in terms of the outcome that I'm hearing that we're all trying to achieve.
Reindeer.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councillor Coombe. Look, I fully support the approach of focusing on outcomes. I think we can achieve it in terms of how we design the intersection without having to take any more land, like I pointed out earlier on. What I might suggest then is that that be amended to add or to read: request a sale of properties 4 and 6, make provision for safe operation of the intersection during the post the sale process. What that does is actually allows us then to design the intersection or work with the Penlink team at Waka Kotahi to achieve those outcomes. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we are locked into releasing public land or actually having to take any more. Because if you look at that intersection itself, my personal and professional view is that there's sufficient space currently to achieve that.
Through you, Madam Chair, may the mover and seconder respond?
Well, hold on, let's just, hold on, we've just got a list of questions, so just hold fire, we'll get some words up.
Okay,
But
just when you're ready.
that's basically what I was saying too in my question. Councillor Cooper.
I guess my question comes from the letter that's included in the report from Shane Ellison, page 27, 28, 29, so very comprehensive. So my understanding is that this has been thoroughly looked into. It's not just the questions we're asking here today, but this has had pretty much a full investigation by AT's, if you look in the conclusion, you know, several of the teams, the strategy teams, the future forecasting teams. It's not just been a quick, you know, because what I understood is, nobody's prepared to do anything and even do a little site plan, but is that true? This has been fully investigated. There's a 3-page letter from the CEO of AT, so it has had a full investigation of the requests from council. It's sent to Councillor Walker.
Before we put any land up for proposed sale or declare it, transfer it across to Panuku because it no longer has a transportation need, it goes through all of the teams in Auckland Transport to have a look at it. It's fair to say that in this case it was recommended for disposal by our teams without the setback. As a result of feedback from the local board and Councillor Walker, we reassessed it, and during that reassessment, there was a closer investigation into the transportation needs along that corridor, and that's the setback that has been provided for and legalised as road is as a result of that further work.
And just one more question is, which I forgot to ask before, but is relevant. When we do consenting, Auckland Transport and their contribution could say, actually, we want you to, you know, as part of your condition, to help us pay for making the safe access.
There would be the ability in any sale to put conditions on it, yes.
Thank you.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Randy is not a council, and he's certainly not a councillor for the Albany ward. So that's the amendment that's been moved. The suggestion that's being put up doesn't address our concerns. It's pretty much what we heard before. So fine, just leave the amendment up there, let people vote on it, and we'll make our appropriate call.
Okay, fair
because
call. Fair call. I was trying to get a compromise,
Yeah.
but fair call. I understand that. Next question, Councillor Filipaina. Or comment,
thank
sorry.
you, Chair. So the land, when it goes to the market, that is going to be purchased by anybody who wishes to purchase each of the pieces of land, especially if we've got, in regards to the Amendment 4 and 6 Brightside Road?
Yeah, theoretically, yes.
And am I hearing correctly just now, with an answer that Councillor Cooper put up, was that we can put conditions on that sale, that we can end up making provision for the access way.
Yes.
As a result of that, I just wanted to get it clear so that everybody around this table knows. With anything that we have around that request for sale, and in particular the provision for the access way, do you think, and there's been some talk earlier when we had the substantive up there, do you think that would be a cost to council if that condition is put on to the purchaser of those two properties?
Through the chair, part of the approach of going through the consenting process is to make sure part of the approach of council not doing more work is to make sure that actually the person who purchases has the cost rather than council. Because as you asked your first question around, we don't know who may buy it, we do not know what they may want to use it for. You know, and actually both of those things will impact actually how you then have to achieve the access.
Yeah, so look, that's the whole point for this, is that any issues that arise would be at the time of purchase, wouldn't it? Look, what I'm trying to get at, Ross, is this, is that if the house is up for sale, I want to purchase both those homes. You then come to me and say to me, look, we got no problem selling it to you, but you will have to make provision of the access way to start at number 6 Brightside Road, Whangaporo. That's what I'm hearing is what you will say to me as the purchaser. And then I have a choice of saying yes or no, or do I just go with what you've asked the request for? That's what I'm trying to get at.
And the question that was asked of me, and obviously this is a matter for council when they sell it, was can conditions be placed on the sale? Any sale of property can have conditions placed on it. The nature of those conditions can impact the value. It depends on what they are, and it depends on what the market is, where the market is sitting. So it would be, generally you would, because it is unknown what the properties may be used for, you and anyone who wanted to intensify development on those sites will need to go through a consenting process, and as part of that consenting process, all matters such as transportation would be considered, and that is the forum that you would generally find that these matters are dealt with, as opposed to dealing with them as conditions of a sale and purchase agreement.
Thank you. Yep.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Darby.
Thank you. Well, it's good that we've narrowed it down to 2 properties rather than the all. It's good to hear the councillors, acknowledging support for the sale of the balance here today. I thought we probably could have refined it, but look, that's up to members. Randy, I've seen the feedback from your chief executive on how you go about resolving that design. It's in the consenting process. In that consenting process, you now have at your disposal the Roads and Streets Framework and the Transport Design Manual. Does those 2 documents, one leads to the other, how you use the Transport Design Manual, does not the Transport Design Manual show AT how to resolve unique situations like this at intersections, dimensions, qualities, safety, all of that? That's the idea of that tool.
That's correct, Councillor Darby. Absolutely, that's our guidebook, if you like, for how we would do things. Certainly, that supports us in terms of the conversations we have at consenting stage. For example, it outlines what our minimum requirements are for how we treat intersections. That, coupled with the fact that we have experts within the wider team in terms of what's the best and safest outcome for intersections, would be dealt with through the design process. So yes, absolutely agree. There's the material and the guidance out there for us to consistently treat these intersections. And again, I just want to point out that the example used around consenting, I totally agree that there are examples where it hasn't worked well, but equally I'd also point out that there are many examples where the consenting process has worked exceptionally well, where we have achieved transport outcomes.
Just to follow up, the transport design manual, it's been a long time coming. There's just some hold-ups on the regulatory side, but Auckland Transport, when it comes to your projects, you're using that. You're bound by it. Just to give members an idea, things that were happening a year ago were not going through the transport design manual process. I think can you just tell us from when you've been using the transport design manual?
Yep, quite correct, Councillor Darby. Previously we had a standard that wasn't necessarily locked in and approved, and so that made conversations quite difficult. With the transport design manual being in place now, it has been launched from memory about 8 to 12 months ago. It's been in use. Not only do we use it for our own projects, but we also use it for private developers that are wanting to design accessways onto our roadways as well. And so that helps us achieve a consistent standard, a consistent outcome as well.
And it would apply to this situation?
It will indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Darby. Good points. Councillor Dalton.
Sorry, Chair. Councillor Darby sort of asked my questions. My second one would be just around the request in the letter to Councillor Walker for support for advocacy with Waka Kotahi. Do we need to do that as well, or are we comfortable that those discussions are already underway?
Rendiu?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Yes, Council, those discussions are well underway. We're part of the project team discussions with Waka Kotahi. Those conversations are really at a technical transport sort of level. We do appreciate and would welcome advocacy from the likes of the councillors and local boards, who would help actually further the case for the improvements we're looking for. Certainly would actually help the conversation.
You confident then?
I'd like to recommend that we do state our advocacy to continue that. They're at the technical stage. The CEO is asking for support from councillors for advocacy to Waka Kotahi.
Already said yes to that.
So the question you're asking is there enough confidence for us to support the advocacy to Waka Kotahi, correct?
My question is, should we be putting a recommendation that we do formally, right, thank you, to Waka Kotahi with the support for the work that they're doing? I mean, they're in technical design, they're having discussions, but it sounds like political support would be helpful.
Okay, give me 5 minutes and we'll put something together. Meanwhile, we'll have a question or comment from Councillor Mulholland.
Kia ora, thank you, Madam Chair, and fellow councillors, thank you for your comments. I just feel, after listening to everything that I had to listen to yesterday about safety issues, that this really raises concerns with me. This is really serious business with people's lives, and I am really worried about the future of these design matters. Ross and team, thank you for your outstanding report. It's always very good work, so I do want to acknowledge that. I suppose just a little red flag in terms of supporting this, for me, is the matter of the discussion yesterday. That is not decided. It is a long way off as to processes and policy. I am worried about people's safety and security as we intensify, and I would like to see some statement made in a purchase and sale agreement, if there was to be one, that we had allowances to ensure that there was safe access. So I feel obliged to have to say something to support this, because I think we are getting to those improvement stages. And one of the things that Randy has said was, which I want to also raise a question about, is there is no firm answer from Waka Kotahi or others about, yes, they will do this, or no, they won't do that. So we're still not quite sure. We're positive that it could have a good outcome, but there is still no final yes or no. So whilst I am meant to be responsible for people
in my role, I suppose I'm very much torn because this sounds like local knowledge. It sounds like, you know, we need to be more careful. Sorry, just in talking to you about that, and whilst I understand you're trying to do something else, I am just wanting to speak to you on this because it's important for me to speak up. So could you just sort of give me some confidence, because when you were saying before, you were saying maybe, and I particularly wrote a note on that, it wasn't that you had firm yes or no answers with regards to would safety measures be put in place. I don't want to be in a few months' time, like the New World example that was raised, be sitting here because something happens to someone. Yeah, I want you to have real confidence, and I want to feel that confidence in how I decide to vote. So just, whilst that may be a bit long-winded, and it is emotional because we're talking about safety of people like you are every day. So I acknowledge your skills. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Absolutely fair point. And I'd just like to sort of precursor my answer with I totally support your sentiment and where you're coming from. I live safety every day. I'm charged at Auckland Transport to deliver on safety outcomes, so absolutely front of mind for me as well. Certainly not in the business of putting our general public that use the roads at risk. What I will say is we have many tools to assess the safety of our road network across the region. And that's a proactive tool that we use to give us a sense of where we would actually need to do investment areas that are greatest need early. And that's an assessment tool that we've actually developed together with Waka Kotahi. So it's a nationally recognized tool for assessing where safety risk lies. This particular location does not feature highly in terms of safety risk as it currently stands. It would sit in that low to medium bracket, obviously high being the locations on the network where we'd actually invest our money to do immediate safety changes. So it is on our safety program, but it's certainly not on the radar to be improved in the short term. There are other locations that we are dealing with right now. Once the Penlink connection is put in place, that may change traffic levels to a bit, and we believe that is a time when we would like to coordinate any improvements or changes to this intersection. That's the intent and how we're going to do it. The reason I was unable to give any assurances around the work we're doing with Waka Kotahi, to be fair to the project team, we are still in early conversations and we're still working out what the traffic impacts are and safety impacts are of the new connection. But rest assured that me and my team are in there representing the need for Auckland and that part of the network as well.
Kia ora, thank you.
Member Wilson.
Thank you. I just have a question because I actually agree with everyone, and I applaud the efforts of Councillors Watson and Walker to do what they're doing. But my question is this: in terms of the consents process, as opposed to if we, and I'm not sure who I'm asking, if we were of a mind to look at this amendment and agree with that amendment, as opposed to, is it still subject to the consents process? So do you get two hits at it? Why I'm asking the question is if I was not a councillor and I wished that to be an amendment, and I'm talking generally for Maori, I wouldn't have that opportunity. I do have an opportunity as part of the consents process to involve. So by way of this, will it still be subject to the consents process is really what my question is, and then some additional.
It depends very much on what the proposed use of the land would be, and it'll come down to level of intensification and what triggers that may have within the consenting process as well. And I'm unable to actually answer the question as to whether it will require to be publicly notified, for example, which goes through a formal process. That would be determined once the use of the land is actually known. But my sense is in terms of the consenting process, it will be whether it's a single development, there'll be a consent process, albeit not the same type or level that would be required for a more intense type of development.
So just to add on to that, Madam Chair, we would be looking at equity of process, the ability for all, Māori included, to have a similar type means to access the system to provide outcomes that are being sought. In terms of this particular proposal that's been put forward today, there's a lot of talk about the 3-page or 2-page letter from the Transport. We congratulate our staff at what a great job they've done. And even if that wasn't the case, there's so much focus on this at the moment. You will feel the pressure regardless of how we, including the CE, how we vote this way. I guess if we're looking at process, which is what we're inclined to do, if it's equity and we wouldn't normally have access by way of Māori, or if it is that we're committing ourselves as this body to the good works and the confidence we have, including the letter from the chair, then we would not be in favour of this amendment. I thought that that's what we had committed to you in doing the work. There is some clearly disagreement with the local knowledge, and I do the same thing, but I guess sticking to this, if there's no equity opportunity for Māori, if it is come to your notice and you're put on notice now and it is endorsed at the highest level by your CE, Madam Chair, we would not be in favour of this amendment, and we would, unfortunately, albeit the good works that have been brought, we would stick with the original. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you. Final question, Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it's a shame that this is the form that the amendment sits in, because my concern is the same. I've sat with Randir and tried to redesign intersections many a time because of the belief that I know best or know how to release my bus from the top of Oniwa Road, with or without buying land, and Randir always nods and nods, and then I realise I'm not the engineer in the situation. So my concern is that supporting this amendment says the access way, which Randir has said will not happen, is not planned, is not funded, and is not part of any plan. So this report and the agenda is on land sales. If there was a, so I guess my question, just double check, Randir, is there is no access way plan, and you would, even if we put this amendment through, there is no guarantee that, like, I'm just trying to understand the plan.
Yeah, when I started, Councillor, the clarification I provided was the land we had set aside in that red line was not, the intention wasn't to provide an access way all the way through. It was for transport needs. The access way that currently exists is historical, but the intent based on our assessment is not to continue the access way all along that frontage of where the red line is, basically.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'll just speak. If it had been changed to the outcome where it was safe, a safe intersection, I would have supported it. But because we're putting in, so this is my just quick speaking turn, I really want to support this, but it doesn't make sense us putting something in that basically enables Auckland Transport and Panuku and the sales team for an outcome that is not real or not planned. So they can't provide something that is not going to be provided through a sales process. So I'm just a bit confused. We're trying to design something that's not going to happen, whereas if it was slightly changed to talk about the safe intersection or safe access, I'd totally support it. But we're supporting something that's not a transport report on an agenda. This is a sales process, and we can't design and plan.
Correct. Okay, team, I'm going to take a... Oh, hold on. No, you've got a question, haven't you?
Yes. God. We spend hours on the things that are marginal and not much time on the things that are central sometimes. But look, I understand the concern of both councillors who are local councillors and respect their local knowledge. It seemed to me that the better way of doing it was that the resolution read to make provision for safe access at, and I'm just wondering whether John or Wayne would accept that. It seems to me that there's, okay, well, there you go. If John's happy with that, then I think we don't even need a vote on it, probably, do we? John, are you happy with that? Save us, mate.
It's
yeah, but well, look,
So I know the way this is going, so in the interest of collegiality and not dying here in my seat,
Thank you, John and Wayne and Madam Chair. It just seems to me that there's different ways of skinning a cat. One is to work on the other side of the road. The other is, make it a condition of the sale on the property, or to do a setback. I'm not an engineer, so I don't want to tell Randy how to do his job operationally, but I accept your concerns about safety, and I think if we've got that flexibility in there, then we can do it by the best manner rather than by a particular manner. So, Madam Chair, I think that solves the problem. I think probably we're all on the same path now. Thank you.
Point of order. Chair.
Hold on.
Just want to do this point of order first, please. As a result of what just been discussed, it's the point of order is around process. So then everybody knows. As a result of where we're now at, would it be better for the mover and the seconder to agree to put this as part of the substantive? Therefore, then it's not an amendment; it becomes part of the substantive. If that.
I'm
just,
happy with that.
Yeah, so that's my point of order around the process, that it no longer is an amendment. You and Linda agree to put that as part of. Oh no, it's not.
Hold on.
So Wayne, just as a matter of interest, please, my friend.
Wayne,
I've never
you're ahead.
interrupted you.
Just shush.
So Wayne, if you could just be quiet, please. So Chair, that way at least it becomes part of the substantive. And has to be agreed by yourself and Councillor Cooper. That's the point of order on process. Thank you.
Thank you, and I accept that.
I just think that this is inherent in the whole thing anyway, because any consenting is going to have to take in safety. That's how the consenting happens. It takes into account the traffic effects, all of that, notwithstanding the previous comments. So I think it's inherent in it anyway, but that as long as that doesn't direct them not to sell part of it or to subdivide it.
I'm told that it doesn't make sense if you add Brightside Road at the end to stop at safe access, because you've said the same thing twice.
To start at, yeah. It is critical that the access ways start as far down from the hazardous intersection as possible. Those words need to say.
Hold on. I'm just going to take a 2-minute break, all right? I just need to, 2-minute break.
Madam Chair, a suggestion is just that in those substantive, it talks about ensuring safe access for all of those properties. That's what we're talking about, aren't we? Not just those particular ones, but the whole corridor will still be safe access. That's what's critical. Well, you're making it out now to molehill. That's the problem.